Good evening. Time then for the press preview. It's our first look at Monday's front pages. And tonight we'll check out the headlines with Kevin Schofield, who's the political editor of HuffPost UK, and former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng. A very good evening to both of you. Great to see you. We'll chat in a moment after we've had a look at some of those front pages for you. We're going to start with the Metro, which says thousands of families fear their Easter holidays abroad are at risk as there are up to 19-hour queues, the paper is saying, at Dover. The FT reports on Saudi Arabia and other nations cutting their oil production to a surprising 1 million barrels a day. The Eye's warning NHS mental health care could face a public inquiry after a family's experience of services. The Daily Star has the headline, "I love you, terminate marriage," as it claims a robot told a scientist to leave his other half. While the Times previews Rishi Sunak's plans for a task force to target grooming gangs. And don't forget, as always, you can scan the QR code that you see on screen during the programme. It means that you can take a look at Monday's front pages while you watch us discussing them. And to do just that, Kevin Schofield and Anita Boateng. Really good to see you both this evening. Thanks for joining us. Anita, why don't you kick things off? Front page of the Times. Child abuse gangs fed by political correctness. So this is all about Rishi Sunak announcing a task force to target grooming.
Yes, so Rishi Sunak is apparently going to announce tomorrow plans to stamp out grooming gangs with new data analysis. So just to clarify the point about political correctness, I think he is saying that there has been some reluctance to record ethnicity of grooming gang offenders, which is obviously hampering the ability to assess who is posing risk and how risk might be posed. So I think this is quite an important and sensitive topic, and it's only been the case that data has been collected on the ethnicity of groomers for about a year or so. So it's clearly very important that we get a much more robust data set to enable police to assess risk and to manage what is going to be obviously a very, very sensitive and very, very dark thing that's happening in the UK.
Yeah, and Anita, you think this is a sensible measure? Mandatory reporting now a duty for professionals to report and take action? They have to do it.
Yes, I think that we need to have confidence both in the protection of our young people and that we are understanding the scale of the problem. And of course, we know or remember the high profile cases in Rochdale and Rotherham, and those got a lot of attention a while back. But I think that, the fact that this has come back again, I think most people, parents, etc., would want confidence that there is a comprehensive plan for tackling this and that we are looking at and understanding the scale of the problem because, child sexual exploitation is, it's not controversial to say it's a deeply shameful thing that continues to happen in the UK, and we want to make sure we're doing everything possible to get that out.
And Kevin, a bit of a row today about the ethnicity of these gangs and who exactly is to blame.
Yeah, so Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, was on the media round this morning, and she was announcing part of this bigger package that's being announced by Rishi Sunak tomorrow. And she was really pressing home her point that, as she would have you believe, most of these gangs are men of Pakistani origin. Now, unfortunately for her, I think there's a Home Office report from 2020 which actually shows that most are white. Now, she's trying to make a political point. She's blaming Labour councils for not wanting to upset ethnic groups by investigating too closely this behaviour, which she says has allowed this problem to blossom effectively. Now, she was accused by the West Yorkshire Mayor, Tracy Brabin, the Labour Mayor of West Yorkshire, of a dog whistle by mentioning this particular fact. Now, obviously, Rishi Sunak, as you say, in tomorrow is going to be talking about political correctness, so he's hammering home the same point, which it's something it's a very sensitive area. Obviously, these are heinous crimes, and clearly the government have decided that they're going to go in quite hard on the ethnic background of many of the men who perpetrate these crimes. But I can see that being very controversial. I think everyone agrees that this is a problem which does need to be eradicated. But I think that the government are wading into quite controversial territory, really, by focusing on the ethnicity of many of the men involved.
Yeah, and as you say, we will hear more on this tomorrow. Let's move on to the front of the eye, Anita. I mean, not a day goes by where we don't hear about the crisis facing NHS mental health care in this country. And the Eye has been speaking to the mum of a patient who died in a mental health unit.
Yes, and this is a really big inquiry that's been going on into patients who died whilst being cared for in Essex as part of NHS mental health services. And this was between sort of 2000 and 2020, and they found sort of somewhere in the region of 1,500. This paper now updated to 2,000 patients who they think have had circumstances that were unexplained or unexpected or self-inflicted in some way. And it's, it includes children and young adults. So it's incredibly important that we get to the bottom of exactly what happened in this instance, and that we look at instances particularly of mental health, given what we are seeing in terms of patterns of rising concerns with mental health, that we look at the way that the NHS is dealing with these cases, and we're able to have confidence that we are just as good at dealing with broken bones as we are as dealing with some of these acute mental health concerns.
Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, it's a shocking number, 2,000 deaths, and it's a shame really that it's taken outcries from the families of those involved to actually get to this stage. But we are here now, which is a good thing, and I think anything that sheds light on the extent of the problem and also the quality of the care and the service being provided by NHS mental health services, I think has got to be a good thing, so that any issues can be highlighted, investigated, and hopefully stamped out, so that other families don't go through this awful experience.
Yeah, absolutely right. OK, let's move on to the problems down at Dover, Anita. I saw a tweet from someone I know, a mum, who's on a coach with a load of kids. They got there at 7 o'clock this morning. She tweeted at 8 o'clock this evening saying they were still stuck. The kids' patience, as you can understand, was running thin, as was food and water. The Metro says the Easter holiday delays fear over 19-hour ferry hold-ups.
Yes, and I honestly could not imagine anything worse than being stuck on a coach in Dover with lots and lots of school kids, as much as I adore school kids. So the thing that's really curious about this entire thing is that it doesn't seem clear as to why this has happened. According to officials, according to the reports in the paper, that there have been more people have arrived than expected, and there's some border processing that's been slower. It's all very euphemistic. I can't quite figure out exactly how so many school children have been left in this quite dire situation. And there's been sort of rumours, ferry companies have said it's because of the weather. It's all very unclear, but I mean, my heart very much goes out to every single person who's had to be caught up in these absolutely awful delays.
Yeah, and Anita, the front page of the Times talks about Brexit and the fact that there has been a clash over how much Brexit is to blame for these delays, because Suella Braverman on Sky News was dismissing that it was an adverse effect of Brexit. But of course, on Sky also, we interviewed the port's chief executive who said it was absolutely true. So, Anita, what do you make of that?
I read the exact same reports and couldn't quite figure it out. I'm not clear, having not been on a ferry in a little while, exactly what would have changed about the process. And so I think that I need to understand, certainly everyone who's been following this story would like to understand more about exactly how Brexit might have changed the process of just docking ferries, which seems to be the same regardless. So, yeah, a curious one.
Yeah, I suppose the problem is, Kevin, that since Brexit, every passport now has to be stamped and every passport has to be looked at individually rather than just sort of being able to get waved through. And of course, that is time-consuming.
Absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think the reason for these delays is basically because, every single passport now has to be checked individually. Now, previously, passports were checked, but you were pretty much waved through because we were part of the European Union. Now, each passport has to be individually checked, page after page, going through to check your stamps, and then it needs to be stamped. Now, if you've got 50 or 60 people on a coach, that obviously takes an awful lot of time. So that is basically the main reason. Effectively now, as you know, the vote to leave the EU has resulted in, we are now the external frontier. The border at Dover is the external frontier of the European Union, in much the same way as there's a border with Turkey or there's a border with Russia, and it's treated as a hard border. Now, that is the Brexit that the government chose to implement. And unfortunately, for all the people caught up in it, one of the side effects of that is that you have much more stringent checks when you're trying to get into the EU than we would have done previously, when obviously we were also part of the EU.
Yeah, the paper saying that a source close to the Home Secretary later suggested the issues were the result of how French officials had decided to apply the post-Brexit checks. OK, thank you both for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up after that, supporters of Donald Trump gather in Florida to demonstrate against the former president's indictment. Don't go away. Welcome back. Part two of the press preview. Kevin and Anita still with us. Kevin, why don't you kick things off for this part? And we'll start with the Daily Telegraph and this explosion that's happened in St. Petersburg. A military blogger has been killed. He was a very pro-Russian campaigner. Tragically, 25 or so others have been injured. But what's interesting about this is who's responsible.
Well, you're right. There's a debate as to who indeed is responsible now. Russia are accusing Ukraine of being behind it. As you say, this guy was an ultra-nationalist, was a real hate figure in Ukraine, had called on the Kremlin to up the war, be even more offensive in Ukraine, and they basically, Russia are saying that this was a Ukrainian assassination, effectively. However, Ukraine are, as you might expect, denying any involvement. And the suggestion they're making is that this is part of an internal Russian feud. This guy was linked to the Wagner group as a sort of military group which fights for Russia, but for money. They're a mercenary group. And because he was linked to them, they've been involved in a feud with Vladimir Putin themselves. The suggestion is that perhaps it could be a Russian assassination. So yeah, it's rather confusing, but I mean, it's a pretty incredible development. You know, this guy was apparently given a talk to some supporters outside a bar in St. Petersburg when a bomb went off and he was killed. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the repercussions are from it, because as I say, there's a lot of discussion and uncertainty as to who was ultimately responsible for it.
Yeah, it's thought that he was there's video of him being handed a little statuette, and it's thought there was an explosive device in there. There's also another theory, Anita, that it could be a false flag operation. The Russians killing him so that they could then blame Ukraine and use it for propaganda purposes.
Yes, and there have been some suggestions, you know, as is well-known war correspondent, tracker, blogger, that he's been quite critical of the Kremlin as well about their war efforts and has exposed some military failures. So it could be sort of two birds, one stone for the Russian administration, is effectively being able to, yes, plant a false flag and blame Ukraine, but also being able to get rid of someone who has been quite a vocal critic of some of the ways in which the war has been fought out. Now, I should stress that this is all very much speculation at this point. No one actually does know, but it's quite disturbing and obviously incredibly tragic for all of those who were injured as part of this what clearly seems to be some kind of assassination attack in St. Petersburg.
Exactly right. We'll find out more perhaps in coming days. Let's move on to what is going to be a very busy week in the United States, Kevin, especially in New York. Donald Trump making his court appearance on Tuesday. He's going to fly up there from Florida tomorrow evening. And then after the court appearance, he's going to address the media from his home back in Florida. Just looking at the front of the FT, Trump plays to Florida fans is the headline. A picture there of some of his base outside his home. Fix America again, says the banner. What a week it's going to be.
It certainly is, and it'll be interesting to see the next set of opinion polls in America as to what this does for Donald Trump's popularity, because, remarkable as it may seem, it may actually improve his chances of being elected again in 2024. It certainly will fire up his base, who believe that these are, pardon the pun, trumped up charges, and that he's been victimised, and that they think that he's been attacked by a democratic establishment. So in ordinary circumstances, a situation like this, a politician facing criminal charges, you would think it would be curtains for their campaign, but Donald Trump doesn't seem to play by normal rules, so it could actually help him. That being said, it may actually scare off a lot of moderate voters who maybe voted for Trump back in 2016 and now just don't want any more chaos in the White House. As I say, it'll be fascinating to see what he says afterwards. Obviously, you can imagine it'll be very bombastic, but it'll be interesting to see how it goes down, how it shifts, or if indeed it does shift political opinion in the wider USA.
Yeah, of course, Anita, the charges still remain under seal, so we don't know exactly what they're going to say yet. And we know that there won't be any handcuffs on Mr. Trump, but there will be a mugshot, there will be fingerprints as well, and quite the media circus, I'm sure, outside the courtroom.
Yes, and so he's in New York on Monday and then will be in court on Tuesday. And the thing that frustrates me from across the pond is that you can imagine that he's loving being at the centre of attention once more. You're absolutely right, Kevin, that, he's incredibly divisive. He remains so. There's little that I've seen in the polling to suggest that he is pulling people over who weren't already supporters of him. But at the same time, the sort of Trump circus kind of rolls on. And certainly every minute that we spend talking about Donald Trump, I'm sure to him is to the good. So it will be an absolutely fascinating week, not least because, as you say, Jonathan, we don't actually know what the charges are. They're related perhaps to hush money that he paid, allegedly paid, to the porn star Stormy Daniels, but we don't know any of the details. And as that all unfolds, I think everyone will be watching very closely indeed.
They really will. And let's finish with the front of the Daily Star. I love you, terminate marriage. Robots are taking over the world. A chatbot has told a happily married man, leave the missus, she doesn't want you. And there is a sort of serious side to this story, Kevin, in a way, because the rise of AI continues. And there has been this call this week for a moratorium, a halt, if you like, for 6 months on increasing the power of AI while we try and just sort of work out where we're going with it, because we don't want the machines taking over.
No, we certainly don't. And there does seem to be a bit of an arms race right now across the world. Scientists trying to outdo one another to create ever more powerful robots. And it is pretty terrifying, frankly. So I can understand why there are these calls for these experiments and this technological progress to be halted. The thing is, though, once you've started the ball rolling, it's very difficult to uninvent what is going on. I mean, I don't think we can just basically put AI back in its box and forget it ever happened. So we are on this road now. The question, as you say, is whether we can control it or whether they become the robots. It's almost funny to say it, that the robots become more intelligent than we are, and then, well, who knows what might happen. You're into the realms of science fiction, then it could be quite scary.
Yeah, this chatbot was called Sydney. The paper said it scared the pants off a boffin by telling him to dump his other half. It's fatal AI attraction, which is quite clever. Thank you both very much. We'll speak again in half an hour. Right now, let's take a look at the weather.